The story begins on a calm morning as passengers boarded Flight 782 bound from Denver to Miami. It was a routine domestic flight, nothing extraordinary, nothing unusual, and no one aboard imagined that within a few hours their lives would balance between hope and disaster. Among the passengers was a quiet 15-year-old girl named Emily Carter sitting in row 17, seat A. She kept to herself, her backpack hugged close, her headphones resting around her neck, and her gaze fixed on the clouds outside the window. No one knew that she carried a secret that would soon place her at the center of an unbelievable event. Flight attendants moved about with practiced ease, guiding passengers to their seats, offering reassuring smiles, checking that overhead compartments were locked, and confirming the final cabin counts. Captain Robert Hayes, a veteran pilot with over 28 years of experience, made his final inspection of the cockpit, flipping switches and reviewing the flight plan with his co-pilot, First Officer Daniel Brooks. Both men were confident, relaxed, and fully prepared for what they thought would be just another smooth flight. The aircraft lifted gracefully into the sky, engines steady, gaining altitude as the passengers settled into a peaceful rhythm. Some opened books, others took naps, a few chatted softly with neighbors. Emily, however, sat quietly and stared out the window, watching the land shrink beneath her. She wasn't afraid of flying. In fact, she loved airplanes more than anything in the world. Her father had been an aviation engineer, and she'd grown up around hangars, cockpits, and simulator screens. Her dream was to one day pilot a plane herself. As the aircraft leveled at 30,000 feet, everything felt normal. Drinks were served, seatbelt signs were off, and the cabin lights dimmed slightly as sunlight filtered through the windows. But then, 26 minutes after takeoff, something changed. A faint, distant beep echoed through the cockpit, barely noticeable but strange enough to catch the co-pilot's attention. He leaned forward, tapped a gauge, and frowned. Before he could speak, the warning beep intensified, transforming from a soft alert into a sharp, urgent alarm. Captain Hayes scanned the displays. Something was wrong with the oxygen supply to the cockpit. As he reached for the backup system, another unexpected alarm began flashing, this time indicating a rapid drop in cabin pressure. In an instant, the situation escalated. The aircraft jolted slightly, the air masks deployed with a sudden hiss, and a wave of confusion washed over the passengers. Inside the cabin, people gasped as masks dropped. Parents pulled masks onto their children. Flight attendants rushed to calm everyone. Emily placed her own mask over her face calmly, noticing that the plane had begun to tremble. She looked around. Panic was spreading quickly. Back in the cockpit, things deteriorated even faster. The oxygen system malfunctioned completely. Captain Hayes tried to radio air traffic control, but the comms flickered and died. Within seconds, both pilots began to lose consciousness. Their training told them to put on emergency oxygen, but the equipment failed before they could recover. The captain slumped forward. The co-pilot collapsed too. The cockpit went silent. Autopilot stayed engaged, but without human control or communication, the aircraft was a silent ghost moving across the sky. Flight attendants tried desperately to contact the pilots. They knocked on the cockpit door again and again. No answer. One attendant used the emergency override key, pushed the door open, and froze in shock at the sight before her. Both pilots were unconscious. The cockpit instruments blinked frantically. The plane was still flying forward. But no one was flying it. Word spread through the cabin within minutes. Whispering turned into fear. People clung to their armrests, tears rolling down their faces. Some prayed. Others tried to call their families, but the connection at that altitude was weak. But Emily did something no one expected. She stood up. She walked toward the front of the plane with a steady but determined stride. A flight attendant tried to stop her, but she spoke firmly, her voice calm despite the tension in the air. She said she had trained on flight simulators for years, that she understood aircraft controls better than most adults, and that if no one else could fly the plane, she had to try. There was hesitation, disbelief, and uncertainty among the crew. But with the pilots unconscious and the plane running out of options, they let her step inside the cockpit. Emily sat in the captain's seat. It felt unreal. She looked at the controls, so familiar yet terrifying under these circumstances. She took a deep breath, placing her trembling hands on the yoke. The plane shook again, reacting to changes in airflow and altitude. She scanned the instrument panel. Warning lights flashed everywhere. But she understood enough to know what to do next. She reached for the headset but realized communication was still down. She would have to stabilize the plane on her own. Her father had taught her how to interpret altimeters, airspeed indicators, fuel gauges, and navigation screens. She had flown virtual recreations of countless aircraft models, including this one. Now, real lives depended on her. Emily disengaged part of the faulty autopilot system and manually adjusted the pitch. The plane steadied slightly, reducing the shaking. She checked the pressure indicator and realized the aircraft needed to descend gradually to a breathable altitude. She eased the yoke forward, initiating a slow, controlled descent. In the cabin, passengers felt the plane lowering, but the movement was smooth. Fear remained, but hope began to flicker. Flight attendants explained that a passenger had taken temporary control and was guiding the plane to safety. Some cried tears of relief. Others stared in disbelief. As the aircraft descended toward 10,000 feet, the oxygen levels normalized enough for breathing without masks. Emily adjusted the throttle carefully, monitoring the engine temperatures. She needed help. She needed communication restored. She tried resetting the systems and flicking switches the way she'd seen in training videos. After 2 failed attempts, the radio crackled faintly. A voice came through, distorted but audible. It was an air traffic controller asking for identification. Emily responded with a shaky voice, explaining who she was, what had happened, and what she was doing. The controller couldn't believe it at first, but her calm, precise language convinced him. From that moment on, she wasn't alone. Controllers on the ground guided her step by step. They told her the nearest airport capable of receiving an emergency landing. They instructed her how to maintain altitude, how to align the aircraft with radar vectors, and how to prepare for descent. Minutes turned into an hour. Sweat dripped down Emily's forehead. Her arms ached from holding the controls steady. But she refused to give up. She followed every instruction with unwavering determination. The passengers sat silently, aware that a teenage girl was the reason they were still alive. As the plane approached the airport, Emily could see the runway lights glowing like a lifeline beneath the clouds. ATC talked her through the landing checklist. She lowered the landing gear, set the flaps, and reduced the throttle. The plane trembled in the wind as it descended toward the runway. At 200 feet above the ground, another gust hit the aircraft. The left wing dipped suddenly. Gasps erupted from the cabin. Emily tightened her grip, corrected the tilt, and centered the plane again. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, but her hands remained steady. The wheels touched the runway with a jolt. The plane bounced once, then settled. Emily applied the brakes carefully. The aircraft slowed, the engines wound down, and the plane rolled safely to a stop. A moment of silence filled the cabin. Then cheers exploded. Tears, applause, relief, People were shouting her name even though most had only just learned who she was. Flight attendants embraced her. Some passengers bowed their heads in gratitude. Emergency crews rushed in, revived the pilots, and secured the aircraft. Emily stepped out of the cockpit, exhausted but alive, greeted by stunned reporters, officials, and aviation experts. News spread instantly across every state, every platform, every channel. A 15-year-old girl had landed a commercial aircraft and saved over 100 lives. Experts called it one of the most extraordinary moments in modern American aviation history. Pilots praised her composure. Engineers analyzed her decisions. And people across the nation celebrated her courage. When asked how she did it, Emily answered with simple humility. She said she had grown up loving airplanes, that her father had taught her everything he knew, and that in that moment, when everyone else was terrified, she realized she was the only one who understood the controls. She said she didn't feel brave, she just felt responsible. Her story became a symbol of calm under pressure, of unexpected heroes, of how knowledge and courage can emerge in the most unlikely places. And it reminded the world that sometimes history isn't shaped by soldiers, presidents, or famous figures. Sometimes, history is made by a quiet girl in row 17 who decides to take the pilot's seat when no one else can. Her name became known in every household, her story added to the archives of remarkable events in the history of the states. The passengers of Flight 782 would never forget her. And the world would never forget the day a plane went silent at 30,000 feet, until a girl in row 17 took the pilot's seat and changed everything.